They weren't fabled, they weren't forged. These artifacts are real, catalogued, tested and undeniable. Yet they sit in silence, offering no explanation. Pulled from shipwrecks, tombs and deserts, each object bears the weight of a story we can't fully read. A sword forged with impossible purity. A statue left unfinished at the bottom of the sea. A golden treasure older than any known civilization. These aren't remnants of fantasy. They are cracks in the timeline. And through those cracks, something older, stranger and less understood begins to show. We tell ourselves history is settled, but the more we uncover, the more that certainty crumbles. When divers first descended off the coast of Antikythera in 1900, they expected to find sponges, not the shattered remnants of a lost Hellenistic world. What they surfaced instead would become one of the most perplexing shipwrecks ever discovered. Beneath layers of coral and centuries of sediment lay bronze statues, marble torsos, dismembered limbs, and corroded faces frozen mid-expression. Some were exquisite, others were crude, incomplete, and strangely raw, seemingly abandoned mid-carving or mid-casting. Why? The wreck, located between the Greek islands of Kythera and Crete, dates to around 70 BCE. The ship itself, believed to be a large Roman cargo vessel over 40 meters long, was likely en route from the eastern Mediterranean to Italy. It carried luxury cargo, fine glassware, amphorae filled with wine or oil, intricately carved furniture, finished statues, and among them, unfinished ones. It also contained the now famous Antikythera mechanism, an advanced analog computer that stunned modern scholars. But while that device stole headlines, the statues have quietly held their own enigma. Several were clearly completed, bronze gods, marble athletes, and mythological heroes rendered with breathtaking detail. But others were left in early stages, blocky, awkward, and disproportionately formed. Some pieces retained visible tool marks, with unshaped limbs and surfaces untouched by polish. A few appeared to be rough wax models. Partway through the lost wax casting process, their transformation into bronze halted forever. Why were they on board? Scholars initially theorized the cargo was being transported to Rome, where wealthy elites clamored for Greek art to adorn their villas and gardens. Greek statuary had become a powerful status symbol in the Roman world. Entire industries grew around copying, restoring, or looting classical masterpieces. This explanation fits the presence of complete works. But what of the unfinished ones? One theory suggests these incomplete statues were destined for final touches in Roman workshops. Sculptors in Italy might have completed them to suit local tastes. Another possibility is that the statues were studio discards or flawed casts, shipped as scrap metal to be melted down and reused. Bronze was expensive, and damaged works were often recycled. Yet the presence of both completed and nearly finished pieces complicates these ideas. Why risk transporting imperfect goods alongside masterpieces? And if the statues were only meant for melting, why do so many show signs of promising craftsmanship? Were these prototypes? Commissioned works left incomplete due to disaster or conflict? Adding to the mystery is the sheer scale and diversity of the cargo. Over 36 marble and bronze fragments have been recovered, with many more likely still buried beneath the seabed. The variety suggests this wasn't a simple looting operation, but part of a much larger and organized trade route, a floating gallery or warehouse bound for Roman aristocracy. And then there's the question of the ship's purpose. Was it merely a transport vessel, or could it have been a traveling workshop or salvage expedition? Some scholars wonder if the ship had stopped at multiple coastal cities, gathering art, raw material, and luxury goods before making its final voyage. The presence of the Antikythera mechanism, unlike anything else recovered, adds to this layered complexity. This was not just a cargo of beauty, but of intellect, labor, and wealth. Today, many of the statues remain in fragments. In Greek museums, their broken forms are catalogued and displayed, tagged with numbers rather than names. The unfinished ones sit especially silent. They hint at stories never completed, myths half told, artisans interrupted, moments lost. No other wreck has yielded such a baffling blend of completed elegance and raw potential. It's a puzzle that defies simple answers. But not all enigmas lie buried beneath the sea. Some are etched in plain sight, on a monument in England where a short string of letters has resisted every attempt at interpretation. In the quiet hills of Staffordshire, England, stands a monument that has drawn the attention of codebreakers, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike. It's not the monument itself that's unusual. It's the message carved into its base, just 10 letters. A short, seemingly nonsensical sequence, OUOSVAVV, beneath it, flanked by the letters D and M. For over 250 years, no one has deciphered what it means. The monument, known as the Shepherd's Monument, was commissioned in the mid-18th century by Thomas Anson and built on the grounds of Shugborough Hall. Its main feature is a relief, a mirrored copy of Nicolas Poussin's painting Et in Arcadia Ego, showing shepherds pointing toward a tomb. But beneath this classical scene, the carved inscription rests like an afterthought, out of place, unexplained. The two outer letters, D and M, are widely believed to stand for the Latin Dis Manibus, or to the spirits of the dead, a common Roman epitaph. But the string in between, OUOSVAVV, has never been definitively interpreted. Its brevity and placement suggest it's a cipher, but of what? And why? Dozens of theories have emerged over the centuries. Some propose it's a Latin acrostic, a phrase where each letter represents the first word of a sentence, perhaps a religious motto, a family tribute, or even a romantic code between lovers. Others have suggested it encodes biblical references, Masonic secrets, or Rosicrucian symbolism. One of the most enduring and speculative ideas is that it's connected to the Knights Templar, who supposedly guarded ancient knowledge and treasures, including the Holy Grail. This theory gained traction thanks to the monument's association with Poussin's painting, which some believe contains hidden references to the Grail legend. The idea that Shugborough might be a clue in a larger encrypted trail was further fueled by popular books like The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and the Da Vinci Code. But no credible historical link to the Templars has ever been found. Modern cryptographers, including experts from Britain's GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters, have tried to crack the code, with no success. Several mathematical and linguistic analyses have been attempted using substitution ciphers, frequency analysis, and polyalphabetic systems. All lead to dead ends. One recent and compelling theory proposed by historian Keith Massey suggests the letters may stand for the Latin phrase Optimi uxoris optimi sororis viduus amantissimus vovit virtutibus. Best of wives, best of sisters, a most devoted widower dedicates this to your virtues. This poetic interpretation aligns with the DM funereal reference and suggests a deeply personal message, perhaps hidden to all but the author. Yet even this theory remains unconfirmed. Despite the efforts of professionals and amateurs alike, the Shugborough inscription has resisted all solutions. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, there is no second version to compare, no key to unlock its meaning. It remains, by all definitions, an open cipher. And that's part of its power. The monument draws visitors not because of what it reveals, but because of what it withholds. It stands not as a statement, but as a question, one that may never be answered. But while this message may have been carved to confound, some stones speak in another language, symbols, figures, and alignment etched into the earth by hands long forgotten, like the pillars of Ethiopia's mysterious Tia megaliths. In the highlands of southern Ethiopia, an ancient silence lingers among the grass. Scattered across a low ridge near the town of Tia stand dozens of upright stone pillars, some plain, some engraved with swords, figures, and cryptic symbols. They rise like sentinels from the soil, watching over a landscape that has long since forgotten their purpose. This is the site of the Tia megaliths, one of the most enigmatic archaeological discoveries in Africa. There are over 40 stelae at the site, ranging in height from 1 to 2 meters. Most are made of local stone, worn by time and weather, but still bearing carvings that seem to hint at stories once known. Many display stylized swords, broad blades with distinct pommels, while others show schematic human figures, perhaps warriors or spirits. Despite their stark visual simplicity, the symbols vary greatly from stone to stone, offering no clear pattern, no obvious narrative. The site was first documented in the 1930s and later excavated in the 1980s by French archaeologists, who discovered that the stones were grave markers. Beneath many of the stelae lay human remains, often placed in crouched positions, sometimes buried with pottery or beads. Carbon dating suggests the site was active between the 12th and 14th centuries CE, though the cultural identity of those buried here remains unknown. What makes Tia especially mysterious is that it doesn't fit neatly into Ethiopia's known historical frameworks. It postdates the great Aksumite Empire, but predates the expansion of the Oromo people into the region. There is no written language associated with the site, and no oral tradition explaining who built it or why. The swords carved on the stele do not match known Ethiopian weapon styles, nor do they resemble the iconography of Christian or Islamic art, both of which were present in the region at the time. Some archaeologists believe Tia was part of a broader megalithic tradition that once stretched across southern Ethiopia and into parts of Kenya and Sudan, evidence of a lost or poorly understood civilization that has since vanished. Other similar sites have been found, but none as dense or symbolically rich as Tia. The presence of swords suggests that the buried individuals may have been warriors, or that martial strength held symbolic value in this culture. Yet some of the stones depict what appear to be breasts, hinting at female figures, perhaps indicating gender-specific roles or social status. There are also geometric shapes, crescents, and crosses whose meanings remain obscure. Unlike other famous megalithic sites, such as Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe, the Tia stelae are intimate and human-scaled. They do not overwhelm the landscape but blend into it, clustered modestly among grass and trees. And perhaps for that reason, they feel closer, like echoes from a civilization just out of reach. UNESCO designated Tia a World Heritage Site in 1980, recognizing it as a rare and valuable glimpse into a forgotten chapter of African prehistory. But to this day, we still don't know what language its builders spoke, what beliefs they held, or why they carved what they did. All we know is that someone, hundreds of years ago, stood on this same soil, raised these stones, and etched their legacy in symbols they believed would endure. And they did, but without their meaning. From stone pillars in Africa to forged blades in the north, mystery knows no border. Some of the greatest enigmas lie not in monuments, but in weapons, like the swords of Ulfbert, forged with a quality no one could explain for centuries. When archaeologists first unearthed swords inscribed with the word Ulfbert, they thought they had found the work of a master. What they had actually uncovered was a centuries-old riddle. These Viking-era weapons, discovered in graves and riverbeds across Europe, date from roughly 800 to 1000 CE, yet they were forged with a level of metallurgical purity that should have been impossible at the time. More than 170 Ulfbert swords have been found to date, many unearthed in Norway, Germany, and other parts of northern and central Europe. While their exact number varies depending on how one defines a true Ulfbert, they all share a common trait: an inscription on the blade, usually in Latin script, reading Ulfbert with slight variations. The origin of this name remains uncertain. Was Ulfbert a single swordsmith, a family, a workshop, or a brand name passed from one generation to another? The real mystery lies not in the name, but in the steel. Most early medieval swords were made from bloomery iron, an inconsistent, impure metal prone to cracking and bending. But metallurgical analysis of several genuine Ulfbert blades revealed something astonishing: a remarkably pure form of steel containing up to 1.2% carbon and showing no traces of slag, something virtually unheard of in medieval Europe. This kind of metal, known today as high-carbon steel, requires controlled temperatures of at least 1,500 degrees Celsius, a feat believed to be beyond the reach of European technology at the time. This quality allowed Ulfbert swords to be lighter, stronger, and more flexible than their contemporaries. They could hold a sharper edge and withstand powerful blows. In battle, an Ulfbert blade wasn't just a weapon, it was an advantage. So how were they made? Some scholars suggest the steel may have come from the East, possibly through Islamic trade routes from Persia or Central Asia, where crucible steel techniques, like the famed Wootz steel of India, were already in use. If so, it implies that Viking or Frankish swordsmiths had access to far-reaching trade networks and knew how to work imported materials with extreme precision. But not all Ulfberts were created equal. Later imitations emerged, blades with similar inscriptions but made with inferior iron. These fake Ulfberts, likely mass-produced to capitalize on the brand's reputation, lacked the structural integrity of the originals. This suggests the name had become something more, a symbol of quality, power, and prestige, much like a medieval trademark. What's also striking is the spread of these swords. Many were found buried with high-status individuals, chieftains, warriors, possibly even mercenaries in the service of Christian or Islamic lords. Others were discovered in rivers, possibly ritually deposited as offerings or lost in battle. Their wide geographic distribution shows how highly valued and widely recognized these swords had become. To this day, no workshop has been definitively linked to the original Ulfberht blades. No records detail how they were made. The process, it seems, was a closely guarded secret, possibly passed down through generations and lost over time. By the 11th century, the true Ulfberht swords vanished from the archaeological record. The technology, it seems, disappeared with them. They remain a historical contradiction, evidence of a skill set that shouldn't have existed when it did. Were the Ulfberht swordsmiths geniuses ahead of their time, recipients of knowledge passed along ancient trade routes, or simply the inheritors of a now-forgotten tradition? Whatever the answer, they remind us that not all innovation leaves a trace, and not all legacies are forged in steel. Some are carved into bone, buried in desert sands, and carried like trophies, tokens of belief, conquest, or something far older. Just like the haunting skulls of the Nazca. Beneath the arid plains of southern Peru lies a culture that saw death not as an end, but as a tool. Among the many wonders of the Nazca civilization, famed for its massive geoglyphs etched across the desert, there is another, darker legacy: trophy heads. Skulls deliberately modified, pierced, and sometimes still bearing flesh when buried. For years, archaeologists debated their meaning. Were they war trophies, sacred offerings, or something more symbolic? Known to the Nazca as early as 100 BCE to 800 CE, these severed human heads were modified with drilled holes in the forehead, often carefully cleaned and sometimes adorned with rope or decorative elements. The hole wasn't random, it was expertly placed, allowing the skull to be strung and carried, likely around the waist or neck. Some show signs of flesh still present when buried, suggesting they were not long-dead ancestors but fresh victims. Many of these heads were discovered in the region's desert cemeteries, particularly in sites like Cahuachi, a major ceremonial center. Excavations revealed rows of isolated skulls, buried separately from full skeletons. Some were found with remnants of hair or facial tattoos intact. Others bore evidence of post-mortem modification, cut marks, drilled bone, and signs of deliberate care. At first glance, the practice seemed rooted in warfare. Captured enemies beheaded and displayed as trophies to showcase victory. This idea was reinforced by the martial imagery in Nazca pottery, which frequently depicts warriors holding severed heads. But a deeper look complicates the narrative. Many of the skulls analyzed through DNA and isotopic testing belonged not to foreigners or outsiders, but to Nazca people themselves. Some were even children. Others showed no signs of violent trauma at death. This suggests the heads may not have been taken in battle, but rather ritually prepared, possibly from willing participants, sacrificial victims, or selected individuals within the community. The heads also played a role in agricultural and fertility rituals. Some were buried near fields or shrines. Others appear in ceremonial contexts, possibly representing ancestral spirits or intermediaries with the gods. The Nazca, like many Andean cultures, believed the dead remained active in the world of the living, and these skulls may have been vessels of spiritual power. Notably, the trophy heads weren't treated carelessly. Some were painted or wrapped with care. Others had cords threaded through their skulls in elaborate ways, suggesting they were carried during rituals, displayed in processions, or even used as sacred objects. One theory posits that these skulls were symbols of transformation, a literal separation of spirit from body, allowing the head to serve as a conduit for divine communication. The act of severing and preserving the head wasn't just violent, it was ritualized and intentional, part of a cosmology where life, death, and the earth were intimately intertwined. To modern eyes, the practice seems macabre, but in the Nazca worldview, it may have been an act of reverence, of unlocking sacred potential through death. Even today, the true purpose of the trophy heads remains uncertain. Were they prisoners of war, sacrifices, ancestral offerings, or all at once? The evidence refuses to settle. But they remain, silent, decorated, drilled for display. And just like the kings of Sumer, some of whom were said to rule for tens of thousands of years, they leave behind a legacy caught somewhere between history and myth. In the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, where writing, kingship, and recorded history began, archaeologists uncovered a text so strange it blurred the boundary between chronicle and legend. Known today as the Sumerian King List, this artifact doesn't merely document rulers and cities, it describes kings who reigned for hundreds, even tens of thousands of years, across epochs that stretch far beyond what history allows. And yet, this list is real, carved into clay, copied across centuries, and taken seriously by the civilizations that followed. The most complete version of the list was found in the early 20th century at Lhasa, inscribed on a clay prism, now housed in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. Other fragments have surfaced in Nippur, Ur and Kish, all ancient Sumerian city-states. Though details vary, the list always follows the same structure, a linear sequence of kings grouped by dynasties and cities, beginning with a stark proclamation. After kingship had descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. From there, it proceeds to list the earliest rulers, some with reign lengths of 28,800 years, 36,000 years, even 43,200 years. These are the so-called antediluvian kings, those who ruled before a great flood, reminiscent of biblical and Near Eastern flood myths. After the flood, the reign lengths shrink to more plausible durations, but still often extend to several centuries. Historians agree the Sumerian king list is not a simple record of real events. It's a blend of myth, political ideology, and selective memory. Some of the later kings mentioned, like Gilgamesh of Uruk, appear in other historical texts and are considered semi-legendary figures. Others are fully historical, confirmed through independent inscriptions and archaeological evidence. So why exaggerate the early reigns so drastically? One theory holds that the antediluvian kings represent archetypal rulers, mythical founders whose impossibly long lives symbolized a golden age of divine order. By anchoring real dynasties to these mythic origins, later Sumerian rulers could legitimize their own authority, tracing power directly to divine will. In this way, the king list functioned not just as history, but as propaganda. Another interpretation suggests the list was part of a sacred cosmology. The Sumerians may have viewed time in cycles, with periods of divine rule giving way to human leadership, separated by cataclysmic events like the flood. The absurd reign lengths then were not meant to be taken literally, but ritually, as markers of cosmic ages. Still, others have proposed that the list preserves distorted memories of prehistoric leaders, oral traditions passed down for millennia before writing emerged. Could these ancient names represent real chieftains or tribal figures whose deeds became exaggerated over time? Regardless of interpretation, what's remarkable is how widely copied and respected the list was. Later cultures, including the Babylonians and Assyrians, maintained versions of the king list and adapted its themes into their own literature. The very idea of divine kingship descending from heaven would echo for centuries across the Near East. Today, the Sumerian king list stands as a reminder that the ancients didn't separate myth and history the way we do. For them, memory was fluid, and the purpose of the past was not merely to inform, but to give meaning to the present. It's a document that records time but warps it, catalogues rulers but mystifies them, preserves history but cloaks it in wonder. And perhaps in that way it prepares us for our final mystery, an object that predates kingship itself, a hoard of golden ornaments, older than writing, found in a Bulgarian necropolis, a civilization that glittered before history began. Long before the pharaohs built their pyramids, before Sumerian scribes etched cuneiform into clay, a group of people on the shores of the Black Sea buried their dead with gold. Not a few ornaments, but hundreds of meticulously crafted objects, necklaces, scepters, diadems and beads. In 1972, while excavating a construction site near Varna, Bulgaria, archaeologists made a discovery that would rewrite the origins of European civilization, the Varna necropolis. Within this ancient burial ground, dated to around 4,600–4,500 BCE, researchers uncovered over 3,000 gold artifacts, weighing more than 6 kilograms in total. It is, to this day, the oldest known processed gold in the world. The craftsmanship is staggering. Thin gold sheets, spiral bracelets, bull symbol amulets, and intricately incised discs, all created more than 1,000 years before the rise of Mesopotamia's first cities. But the gold is only part of the mystery. The graves themselves tell a story of unequal wealth and complex hierarchy. Of the 294 burials uncovered at Varna, some contain little more than a skeleton. Others, like Grave 43, are astonishing. There, a male individual was interred with over 1,000 gold objects, weapons made of copper, finely polished stone tools and ornate pottery. His bones suggest he was muscular, likely a leader or warrior, but the opulence surrounding him indicates something more. A stratified society, one that had developed a concept of elite status, ceremony and wealth long before most textbooks would allow. And yet, this society left no written records. We don't know what language they spoke, what gods they worshipped, or what political system governed them. But they traded widely. Beads made of Mediterranean shells and obsidian from distant regions were found in the graves, proof of long-distance exchange networks stretching across prehistoric Europe. The Varna culture, as it's now known, flourished at the dawn of the Chalcolithic, Copper Age, when metallurgy was just beginning to emerge. These people were among the first in Europe to smelt copper, create gold ornaments, and bury their dead with symbols of power and identity. Yet within a few centuries, the culture disappeared. No great cities rose, no monumental temples stood. All that remains is what they left in the ground. And that, perhaps, is the greatest enigma. Why did such a technologically advanced and socially complex culture vanish without a trace? Was it climate change, internal conflict, or invasion by less ornate but more organized neighbors? No one knows. Today, the artifacts from the Varna necropolis are housed in museums, but they raise more questions than they answer. How did these early people learn to work gold with such precision? Why were only certain individuals buried with such riches? And why, despite their achievements, were they forgotten for nearly 7,000 years? The Varna gold treasure reminds us that history is not a steady march from simple to complex. Sometimes the peaks come early and vanish quickly, buried beneath layers of time, waiting to be unearthed. And now that you've seen all 7, a deeper question remains. How many more stories like these lie hidden beneath our feet, still undiscovered, still unexplained? They were real, unearthed, examined, displayed, and yet they don't explain themselves. Some hint at vanished civilizations, others challenge what we believe technology could do. Together they reveal something deeper than lost knowledge. They reveal our assumptions, that history is linear, that we know where it began and how it progressed. But these artifacts don't follow that script. They interrupt it. They remind us that the past is not fully mapped, and perhaps never will be. If you found this journey through the unknown as fascinating as we did, consider subscribing. It helps bring more untold stories to light. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, theories, or questions. And if you know someone who loves a good historical mystery, share this video with them. There are more stories waiting, on this channel and still beneath the earth. Watch the next one. We're just getting started.